Do you believe that this is a difference between the Department of Defense and federal civilian? The Department of Defense, maybe leadership is more intrusive, which is a kind of a negative word, but it's positive the way I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the word intrusive can be taken as a negative, but it's intended to be a positive. In other words, I'm interested in you as a Marine, as a subordinate of mine, as an equal of mine, and sometimes even as a senior of mine. If I notice behavior, that I have to be a trusted advisor, and we have to have a conversation that sometimes is uncomfortable. And you'll find out things that, A, you need to be trusted to keep confidential and have integrity to do that. But you also have to be able to then take the next step, which is to try and find a way to help them navigate the challenge that they're dealing with.
Welcome to the Best8a Podcast. In this episode, we talk with Christian Macmillan, former Director of Staffing and Training Development at the U.S. Marine Corps and Program Manager at the DHS. Here's what he had to say.
Christian, thank you for joining us. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your career, in particular with the Marine Corps, your first position?
Yeah, glad to. First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Something like 47 years ago, I stood on the yellow footprints of Parris Island. Anyone who's been a Marine or knows anything about the Marine Corps understands the yellow footprints. Completely unprepared for what the next 13 weeks would throw at me. And I learned very quickly as a young recruit that what was expected of me was everything I could throw at it, to constantly challenge myself. No one was there to harass me. No one was there to degrade me. No one was there to, constantly berate me, although that did happen.
Hey.
That was not their job. Their job was to teach me to push myself and then to learn to work with others on a common mission.
Tough love.
And so, yeah, tough love, exactly. And, that stood me, those lessons from 13 weeks, stood me in good stead for the remaining 32 years of my time as a Marine. I walked away from that with an experience that told me that leadership is a responsibility. It's not a position. Leadership is an obligation. It's not what's the word I want to use? It's not something that you put on a resume. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to be focused more on their resume building than they are on their character and leadership building. So what I learned from the people who led me, the Marines who led me for 32 years, and the ones that I was fortunate enough to lead as well and get their feedback on my skills, was that treat people with dignity, treat people with respect. It doesn't matter whether they're military or not. If you treat people with dignity and respect, if you do everything you can to help them build their self-esteem and remain motivated, sure of themselves, and believe that the organization, no matter what organization, actually has their best interests at heart, then none of us are successful without that we are entrusted to lead and supervise. So, those are the most important things that I learned.
How do you build self-esteem of the people that you lead and at the same time correct them and help them to be better, right? Because if you're telling people, hey, you do this, don't do that, or how do you combine building self-esteem with sometimes the tough situation where you have to tell people a little bit what to accomplish or what to do? How do you combine those?
Well, yeah, there are times where you have to be very blunt, very direct, very candid with people about behaviors and performance. The key is not making it personal. It doesn't become something that is a personal attack from someone in a position of authority or superiority, right word would be authority, over another person. In other words, you have some sway in the outcome and the continued progression of their careers, that you don't leverage the fact that you have that authority, but that because you have that authority, you have the responsibility to help shape them,
right,
to help them understand what it is that went wrong, help them figure out on their own, do some investigation on their own of how to improve in future endeavors. In other words, having an opportunity to step back. What would you have done different? There will be rare cases where that goes sideways because some people, unfortunately, find it difficult to accept that they made a mistake or that they did something that was not of the greatest performance outcome.
Right.
And that becomes a little bit different conversation. But those generally are very, very few and far between. it requires a different set of conversational skills. But by and large, you do it without making it personal. You do it without personal attacks. You talk about what the behavior was, what the outcome was, how it was different from what you expected, and how to improve it the next time that you're faced with that same challenge or that same opportunity to perform.
So how do you move from the Marine Corps to this? Maybe we can skip it because it was only a few months, you're right, that you were in industry, Kinder Morgan, it seems.
Right.
I'm just curious, what happened? How do you move? And this is something that we talk about in the podcast very often, how people move from federal to industry. What was that? Was that a disappointment over there? Because look at, when I see your story, it's like 30 years in the Marine Corps, 7 months with private industry, and then again for decades in the federal world. What was that?
Yeah, I have nothing but great things to say about Kinder Morgan. I retired from the Marine Corps. I also did a little bit of private consulting with a small company called Achieve Global. Not so small, they're actually pretty large, but from a connection from my time on the Marine Corps on sales and training and some of the same stuff we were just talking about a second ago about, coaching, mentoring, and that sort of thing. But I had to make a decision about, am I going to fully retire or am I going to stay engaged? I was only in my early 50s, so staying fully engaged was important. I just happened to apply for both positions within days of each other. Was interviewed for both positions, the one at Kinder Morgan and the one at Special Operations Command, within days of each other. As you well know, the federal process of hiring is incredibly slow, and Kinder Morgan offered me a position. I was quite taken with the opportunity. It was quite a funny story, actually, because I said to the group, I was hired by a panel of executives from Kinder Morgan, and I said to them in the middle of the interview, I said, you do realize that all of the stuff that you do, I don't know anything about. I've never done any of it. Never worked around train systems, never worked around, bulk ship systems, and I've never done any of it. And they said, yeah, we got it. We read your resume. You answered all the questions truthfully. So I said, so why are you interested in me? They said, we expect that you're going to bring to our organization 32 years of leadership, training, and development that you learned in the Marine Corps. And we want to see what that does for our organization. Fast forward to 6 months later, I got a phone call from the person who ended up hiring me at Special Operations Command and drawing me back into the federal government to ask if I was still interested, which I was. So I made the decision to switch back to the federal government. Part of it was just because of the mission of that particular organization, the Special Operations Command, where we were in our nation's history at the time, and the ability to become involved again in the security of our national interests, and quite honestly, the culture and brotherhood of military services, whether you're civilian or actual armed forces. Because we're all supporting one another. I actually really enjoyed my time with Kinder Morgan. I learned a lot from the people there, and there was a different approach. The federal government, the military, don't worry much about profit and loss. We worry a lot about mission performance, doing the right thing for the taxpayers. But profit and loss aren't really part of it. When you're in the private sector, profit and loss, as one of the VPs said to me, said, you're either making me money or you're costing me, or you're saving me money. If you want to keep a job with us, you're either making money or you're saving me money.
That they told you?
Costing me money.
They told you that?
Yeah.
And it's fine, because it's the truth. Yeah. Now, can we say this? I guess it depends on the person, right? But if you work with Special Operations Command or with the Marine Corps, you mentioned the word brotherhood. I guess once you get that, moving to a situation where it's a little bit more profit and loss, I'm not sure if the profit and loss go together with the brotherhood idea. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking about this for the first time, myself, because I'm not a former anything. But I wonder if there's some sort of magic and appeal of, brotherhood that you can have with Marine Corps, with the Department of Defense, some certain groups in the Department of Defense, that maybe you don't find that in private sector. Is that true, you think?
I think that, it's an interesting point and an interesting thought. I think that the concept of shared sacrifice, shared adversity, is important to building a brotherhood. So if you think about it, the Marine Corps, we go to recruit training, 60 or 70 of us all together sharing the same pain for 13 weeks. And then that concept continues. We have something in common. I think that under the right type of leadership environment, one that is focused again on people, building a team, is one that can exist anywhere. I think that companies, and I'm not talking about free salads in the cafeteria or smoothies every morning for breakfast and, the company's picking up. That's not the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I'm talking about a shared vision of where an organization is going, that it is aligned with a set of values, ethics, morality, a sense of service. Because no matter what business you're in, you're serving someone or something. You are serving a customer. You're serving, if you think about it, you're serving your employees. If you can crack the code of what it is, and if you hire properly, I'm trying to think of who it was that said that, I want to say it was one of the executives or the owner, founder of Mary Kay, said that we made a lot of hiring errors because we needed to hire a lot of people. And, the federal government needs to hire a lot of people. Companies quite often find themselves, particularly now as pandemic, they're all, searching for the same talent pool for people to fill positions. And if you're in a hurry to fill a position as opposed to taking the time to really think about the person that you're hiring and whether they can fit into the culture of your organization.
You work 30 years in the Marine Corps. You go only a few, like a year in the private sector, and then you go back to the Special Operations Command, SOCOM. And I'm thinking that the brotherhood, there's a feeling there. It's not the money that you were making in one place versus the other. I think is the mission. The truth is that maybe the mission of at least some areas in the federal government and some areas of the Department of Defense have a little bit more meaning, maybe, than some private sector companies. I don't know. I'm a private sector person, so I don't want to say anything. I love the private sector, as you can imagine. But it's a little bit the truth that certain areas may have this thing, and that's why maybe you went back.
Yes, that is true. It did have a lot to do with it. I didn't miss the camaraderie. I didn't miss the brotherhood. But at the same time, I want to be clear that there was a brotherhood, there was a culture at Kinder Morgan. It was just different. It wasn't one of shared adversity. It wasn't one of a commonality of mission. It was more about, theirs was more from a safety perspective, from a, and it was about profit and loss, quite honestly. So the opportunity to learn about what they did was something I could also take away when I came back to the SOCOM and talk about as well, and use them as an example. Quite honestly, the first time I ever used SharePoint working with Kinder Morgan, and so that set me up. And
There you go.
That gave me the step into knowledge management from a perspective of a platform, a technology, that part of it, not the people process part of it, but at least the technology.
I love it. It's interesting, the difference in mission between some agents in the federal government and the private sector. Maybe there's a little bit more magic on one, at least. That's how I feel and think about it right now. If somebody can tell me something different, that would be great. Okay, so what do you do after SOCOM?
I left SOCOM and joined Department of Homeland Security, Office of the Chief Information Officer, where I was involved in knowledge management, training and development, particularly in the IT arena. I ran a program, the IT immersion program, where we took newly hired IT folks from across the components of DHS. You think about it, DHS is made up of, DHS came out of adversity. It was put together after 9/11, and there are a variety of different mission sets that are in the Department of Homeland Security, from ICE to CBP to Secret Service to, Border Patrol, Customs Enforcement, all of that kind of stuff. So, but if you're coming into an IT environment, you have to not only understand the culture of your organization, but you need to understand the culture of the overarching organization. Where are we going with DHS? How do we fit into, as the third largest department in the federal government, how do you fit into the entire executive branch? What is it that we do? What is our mission? How do we accomplish it? And how does IT and cybersecurity, as it became more prevalent after that, how does that support those mission sets? How do you fit in as a person, as a new employee?
So you would take new hires from every component and train them a little bit about the ways of OCIO headquarters. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Now, I will say that process has grown immensely. DHS OCIO now is doing it far more eloquently than I did in the very beginnings, or when I took it over. It had been in place for a couple of years. I was brought on board to to continue to build it and run it. It required a lot of interaction with senior officials across the department. All of the senior chief information officers from the components and their staffs played a role in that process so that they, the new hires could hear directly from those folks. Not just me as a talking head on a lot of PowerPoint slides and that sort of thing. These are real people who came in to talk about the mission, talk about what it is that they were going to expect of these folks who were new hires and how important it was what they were doing, why they had brought them on. So, again, one of the most important parts of a team is make sure that people understand how they fit into that. What is it that you do for the mission? Someone once said to me, if you want to know if what you do is important, stop doing it for 30 days and see if anybody notices. And then you'll know. So we've all had situations where we had to do this manual report or some report every 30 days. You turn it in and nobody ever says anything about it. Imagine if you didn't do that report. Would anybody really know if you don't get any feedback on it? The IT community, the cyber community, knowledge management community, those types of things, you get instant. I'm certain that CrowdStrike got instant feedback a few days ago, instant feedback on some of their processes. The unfortunate part of it is you tend to get the negative feedback much more often and with a louder voice than you do the positive feedback. And that's where, if you're in a supervisory position, you really have a choice to be three people. You can be a supervisor and you can do the HR things that are necessary and you can make sure people validate their time cards on time and their performance evaluations are done on time, all of that kind of stuff. And they show up on time and they complete their task. You can be a manager and you can make sure that programs work, that the people who own those programs are making progress with them, that the processes are staying in place. Or you can be a leader, or I should say, or you can be a leader. A leader is a person who thinks about the individual and how they fit into all of those other two things. So a supervisor notices that a person is coming in late or showing up late on a consistent basis for 2 to 3 weeks, and they want to have a conversation, and they talk about them being late and then what the detriment is to the team and that sort of thing. The leader looks at them and says, I've noticed a pattern of behavior. Help me understand what's going on. Tell me what is going on that's causing this behavior to happen. The supervisor is interested in the fact that you're late and things aren't getting done, or perhaps it's impacting the other team.
The leaders are interested in the why.
The leader is interested in why, and they're interested in the person because the behavior is not indicative of past behavior. What is going on? And you might find that they're dealing with a personal situation. I will say that the one thing that I have noticed that is very different from my time in the Marine Corps and my time in the federal government. In the Marine Corps, we had a term called leadership is intrusive. Leadership means that I'm going to know about you as a person. You're not going to like some of the questions I'm going to ask you from time to time because you're going to think that they're personal questions, but they are important because you're a member of the team and we need to make sure that we are aware of what's going on in your life and we are interested in helping you deal with that problem because we're a team, we're a family. As a federal civilian, there's a reluctance to get that deeply involved in another person's environment to know why they're doing these things unless they want to tell you. Some people find that it's, you're being intrusive. You're asking me questions that I don't want to answer. And so,
do you believe that this is a difference between the Department of Defense and federal civilian? In the Department of Defense, maybe leadership is more intrusive, which is kind of a negative word, but it's positive the way I think about it, because of the reason you're saying it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the word intrusive can be taken as a negative, but it's intended to be a positive. In other words, I'm interested in you as a Marine, as a subordinate of mine, as an equal of mine, and sometimes even as a senior of mine. If I notice behavior, that I have to be a trusted advisor, and we have to have a conversation that sometimes is uncomfortable. And you'll find out things that, A, you need to be trusted to keep confidential and have integrity to do that. But you also have to be able to then take the next step, which is to try and find a way to help them navigate the challenge that they're dealing with. It might be someone in their family is sick. Maybe they're having a problem and they're married. Maybe they're having financial problems. Those types of things. And unfortunately, at least my experience, I can't speak for every federal civilian, was that there was a reluctance to do that. Everybody wanted to talk about, the job and the emails and the tasks and your to-do list and that sort of thing, but and then talk about the quality of your performance without getting into the nature of why outside of the 8 hours a day that you devote to your federal job, more in many cases, that is not performing the way you want it to occur. That requires trust. It requires a level of belief in an individual's integrity, their character, and that they're not looking for an opportunity to maybe find fault with you. They're looking for a way to actually truly help you. So
I love it.
Or assist. I mean, help might be the right word, but to assist in navigating. Because sometimes you may not know that one of the things that I told people that I learned very early on in my life in the Marine Corps and in the Federal Service was the Federal Service is not a meritocracy. Federal Service, it's not, in my opinion. If it was a meritocracy, I could compete. I show up on day one. 6 months later, somebody's looking at me and going, hey, we really hired this guy at too low of a GS grade. He deserves to be promoted. The federal HR rules, I understand them, don't allow you to do that. You've got to move to another position. You've got to apply for another position somewhere else. And there may be people who disagree with me on this. But the point that I'm trying to get at and why I use that example is we hire a lot of federal civilians, new employees every year from private sector, from the military, and they come with a different set of expectations about what the benefits and the value of an organization sees in their performance. You bring on a high energy, extraordinary performer, and they don't understand how it is that you navigate a federal career. How do you move from, one position to another? In Dell, maybe somebody walks up to you and says, hey, I've been noticing you're doing a great job, and I want to offer you a position to be a supervisor of this other team.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Christian. Goodbye.